Before we dig into this video, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The content shown is solely for educational and entertainment purposes. A quarter-century of diamond-dripped parties, platinum plaques, and charity galas was never supposed to end under fluorescent courthouse lights. Yet here we are, sifting through the ashes of what prosecutors call the ghost room empire. A machine that, if the jury buys it, turns Sean Diddy Combs from chart topper into covert kingmaker. Sit tight, because by the final gavel, you might be redefining the word influence forever. The first alarm didn't blare on TMZ. It blinked on an FBI ledger no blogger could see. 7 wire transfers, each bouncing through twin shell companies parked in Luxembourg and sun-splashed Ibiza, left the bureau scratching its head. The dollar amounts dwarfed merch revenue and dwarfed the tour merch math. Investigators lined up affidavits. In 2001, a cross-border sting zeroed in on bad boy Europe, ready to seize ledgers, laptops, maybe even passports. Then the phones went cold. Warrants that were days from signature vaporized. Agents were reassigned overnight, and the case file was stamped further review higher authority. Retired agent Mark Halperin told the court, "It felt like someone yanked the fire alarm before the match was lit." But inside the Bureau's forensic accounting unit, one junior analyst kept digging. She traced the transfers forward and found they didn't stop in Europe at all. They ricocheted through a mail drop in Macau and resurfaced weeks later as consulting fees for a boutique DC lobbying firm that had never publicly listed a client in the music industry. The paper trail was so convoluted that auditors joked it looked hand-knitted. Yet buried in the metadata was a single, unredacted name. The firm's founding partner had once clerked for the same federal judge, now rumored to be on Diddy's speed dial. That discovery, Halperin said, was the moment agents realized they weren't chasing a celebrity skimming off concert cash. They were staring at a laundering lattice woven straight into the Capitol's power circuits. That was the first breadcrumb. It wouldn't be the last. But red tape thickens fastest when fresh power strolls in. And in 2004, a lanky senator from Chicago stepped into Diddy's orbit. Picture a candlelit ballroom on Michigan Avenue, 2005. Cameras flash, violin strings hum. And under low chandeliers, Diddy leans toward Senator Barack Obama, allegedly registered under an alias to dodge guest list leaks. 2 years later, a quieter gathering inside a Washington brownstone marked Diddy Cultural Liaison. In an internal DNC memo, nobody outside the Beltway noticed. Inside the Beltway, everything changed. When an FBI field office filed for a 2009 wiretap to chase suspected narco-laundering tied to Bad Boy Productions subsidiaries, the request sprinted uphill and was decapitated minutes after a White House switchboard logged an unspecified legal routing call. The tap never happened. The suspect tour money kept orbiting back offshore. And law enforcement morale? Halperin said, it nosedived. And in the shadows of that failed wiretap, campaign season kicked into overdrive. Diddy's Vote or Die concerts, marketed as civic engagement, morphed into high-octane donor fishing expeditions, where backstage wristbands allegedly cost more than front row seats. Flight manifests show the same Gulf Stream that ferried rappers to Miami also shuttled freshly maxed-out bundlers to closed-door strategy dinners in Georgetown. By election night 2008, insiders whispered that Combs had become less a pop culture endorser and more an unofficial field marshal mobilizing college town turnouts with free ticket blitzes, while quietly funneling six-figure production reimbursements to shell LLCs tied to digital ad buys. In Beltway shorthand, he'd graduated from guest list to kingmaker. And no one seemed eager to question how the music mogul's campaign generosity always arrived layered in just enough secrecy to keep watchdogs guessing. If access can buy silence, what happens when that access reaches 1600 Pennsylvania? Halperin's successor testified that Combs slid onto an unofficial cultural asset list around 2010. Those designations live off the books, no FOIA trail, no public oversight. Only 3 federal chairs signed those slips. The Bureau mapped 11 separate pro-best trafficking whispers in Miami, salt complaints in LA, wire fraud signals in Atlantic Itch, collapsing after cryptic Capitol calls. One analyst wrote, "Not celeb immunity. Institutional override." Translation: Someone in Washington kept pulling parachute cords every time the case nosedived toward indictment. Behind every shelved investigation sat the same vanishing footprint, a sealed professional courtesy. Notes stamped with an executive branch crest and routed through the Justice Department's Office of Legislative Affairs, an office that normally mediates Hill briefings, not felony probes. Agents eventually pieced together a pattern. Whenever Combs's name appeared in a case file, a senior counsel inside that office would request a 72-hour interagency review, after which the paperwork either went missing or returned so heavily redacted it was functionally useless. The internal nickname for the phenomenon became the Midnight Eraser, because those emails always hit inboxes between 11:57 p.m. and 12:05 a.m. The digital witching hour, when oversight systems logged the fewest eyes on duty. And then came the Vineyard night. August 2014, Martha's Vineyard. A shingled estate owned by a defense tech tycoon hosts an off-calendar charity dinner. Cameras were forbidden, yet a whistleblower still leaked one glossy shot. Combs flanked by President Obama and Reverend Al Sharpton, wine glasses halfway raised. For years it was dismissed as a blurred rumor. In court it resurfaced tethered to a declassified CIA memo labeling Diddy, a high-value cultural influencer with information-gathering potential. The agency never called him an employee. They didn't need to. A symbiosis was enough. You host the after-parties, we listen at the walls, you stay out of prison. Fair trade unless you're on the receiving end of the blackmail. Guests that night signed non-disclosure waivers so sweeping they barred even future recollection in memoirs. Yet flight manifests later subpoenaed and discovery revealed a roster straight off a classified cables index, a former NSA deputy director, 2 hedge fund architects of cyber warfare startups, and an emissary from a Gulf energy conglomerate under FCPA scrutiny. According to the whistleblower's accompanying notes, discussion over desert shifted from philanthropy to cross-platform sentiment steering. Bureaucratic jargon for manipulating voter mood via celebrity-driven social graphs. When the tycoon's staff rolled in a laptop demo of real-time influencer heat maps, Diddy allegedly quipped, "Tell me whose dial I need to spin. I'll bring the party." In that moment, prosecutors argue the mogul's backstage pass became a bargaining chip. And every clink of crystal in the candlelight sounded less like a toast and more like the opening bell of a shadow marketplace. And nothing says blackmail quite like hidden cameras. Fast forward 1 year, customs flags Combs's Gulfstream returning from SIT. The alert lives on DHS servers for 37 minutes, just long enough for marshals to prep a secondary search. Then a 41-second call from a White House counsel extension hits the switchboard. Alert canceled. 2 days later, $500,000 swims into a pack, bankrolling the 2016 cycle. Mere coincidence, defense says? Prosecutors raise an eyebrow. Away from runways, a Miami search warrant targets 3 drives rumored to contain hours of covert footage, bedrooms, pools, studios allegedly filmed without consent. 20 minutes after the warrant clears, a suspicious fire guts the server room. Fire marshal notes accelerant traces. Somebody tipped them, the feds insist. Still, one mirrored drive surfaces months later in a Puerto Rico lockbox. Preview clips show VIPs' labels, redacted, inebriated, compromised, and utterly unaware. Forensic techs finally cracked the Puerto Rico drive after 4 weeks behind an air-gapped rig. And what spilled out was metadata gold. Timestamps matched the very nights Combs's jet logs placed him in Miami, and a rented chateau outside Paris. Embedded GPS pings confirmed some cameras were hidden in guest rooms rented by major label executives. Frame overlays showed date codes later altered in post, proving someone had curated the clips for maximum leverage. The smoking G***N detail, however, wasn't motion picture at all. It was an audio track accidentally left on screen during export. A muffled voice analysts say 94% likely Combs can be heard joking, quote, "Keep the lawyers thirsty. That's how you buy rain," unquote. Prosecutors claim that single line turned hours of voyeuristic footage into a blueprint for systematic blackmail. It's now Exhibit E for extortion. When leverage becomes film, reputations become currency. October 2022, Newark. A climate-controlled storage unit cracks open to reveal the ghost room cache. Dozens of SSDs, hundreds of Polaroids, a leather-bound ledger marked BL priority. Agents flip through scrawled entries. Bo plus RSL. Hendled, donation received. Initials unproven, implications volcanic. One snapshot shows a multi-platinum star in tears beside a contract stamped urgent. A week later, she signs with a distributor in Diddy's pipeline. Another entry tracks hush payments routed through. TriStar shell accounts the same network later cited in Britney Spears' conservatorship leaks. Every scribble ends with a cost column labeled simply, use. Tucked into the back of that ledger, agents found a folded, water-stained index card listing for code names. Halcyon, Pinstripe, Blue Note, and Dawn Rider. Each paired with a 6-digit figure and a date that matched spikes in both campaign contributions and sudden social media takedowns. Digital forensics later traced Halcyon to a viral hashtag smear that torpedoed a Senate challenger within 48 hours. While Blue Note aligned with an abrupt tour cancellation for a rapper who'd publicly criticized Combs days earlier, the amounts weren't payouts. They were budgets earmarked for weaponizing reputation at the flick of a wrist. In other words, the ghost room wasn't just a vault of kompromat, it was a command center, and every entry was a mission log. Blackmail isn't about releasing dirt, it's about reminding people you own the shovel. If Ghost Room proved Combs could mute rivals, a 2015 taped call suggested he could sway precincts. We flipped 5 districts, Blue don't forget who paid. A voice matching Combs warns an unnamed lobbyist. Prosecutors say the timing aligned with targeted, celeb-driven voter drives in swing counties. Defense calls it puffery. The jury listens, stone-faced. Then came the numbers no one could shrug off. County-level FEC. Filings revealed that in the 3 weeks surrounding that taped call, shell packs linked to the same TriStar banking corridor funneled nearly $4.2 million into micro-targeted. Get Out the Vote pushes mostly cash and rival payments to pop-up marketing firms. Incorporated days before the spend and dissolved within a month. Data analysts testified those blitzes bombarded specific zip codes with influencer-branded SMS blasts and last-minute rideshare vouchers, nudging turnout by margins small enough to dodge national scrutiny yet large enough to flip city council seats and, by extension, entire. In effect, prosecutors argue, Combs's leverage portfolio didn't just muzzle enemies, could bend the ballot box itself, weaponizing celebrity charisma as a turnkey political scalpel. Every empire looks invincible until the frightened realize they outnumber the feared. The press now calls it the blacklist case, because that's what the Ghost Room dossier essentially is, a catalog of reputations mortgaged for silence. If a verdict lands guilty, Combs faces a lifetime behind bars, and a culture faces its own complicity. If he walks, the message is darker. Influence can still outrank evidence. So, viewer, pivot the spotlight. How should a society treat a mogul who allegedly traded mixtapes for microchips of leverage? Does political capital excuse private devastation, or does it condemn everyone who looked away? Drop your verdict in the comments. Smash the like button if transparency still matters. And subscribe for the next chapter, because the names in that folder didn't end with one man, and the final reel is still rolling. Thanks for watching. Stay curious, stay critical, and remember, when power meets secrecy, someone always pays the tab. Just make sure it isn't you.